Welcome to the High End Breakdown, where I break down movies that you like. And today, we're gonna be looking at the sequel to Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2, which was released in 2004. And after its release, Spider-Man 2 is widely considered as the best Spider-Man and superhero film ever made. And really, it's actually not hard to see why. As the film explores the struggling life of Peter Parker and the burden of being Spider-Man, and it makes the audience relate to Peter's personal conflicts and understand the consequences and struggles of being a hero. Sam Raimi returns as director, along with the main cast and crew, and with producers Laura Ziskin and Avi Arad returning as well. And elements of the story is mostly inspired by the 1967 storyline Spider-Man No More, where in that storyline in the comics, Peter quits being Spider-Man because he gets no respect despite how many lives he saves, or because JJ was being a massive asshole. And with that info dumping out of the way, let's go ahead and re-enter the world of our favorite web-headed hero. The movie starts off with Peter Parker running late on a job. 2 years have passed since becoming Spider-Man, and Peter is very much finding his double life increasingly difficult, struggling to balance his crime-fighting life as, of course, Spider-Man and his normal life as Peter Parker. Peter works as a pizza delivery boy but would later on get fired because of the traffic, him saving a bunch of kids, and giving iconic lines.
Pizza time!
And also because he failed to deliver the pizzas before 29 minutes. He still works at the Daily Bugle, but as Peter explains, the Bugle did kind of ruin Spider-Man's reputation, and JJ is very much happy about it.
A fact I'm very proud of.
Peter now attends classes at Columbia University, and he is very much running late on his classes. He bumps into Professor Kurt Connors, whom you may know is, of course, the Lizard in the comics and in The Amazing Spider-Man as the main villain. Connors explains to Peter that his grades have been declining, and he gives him a chance as long as he submits his research paper about fusion. Peter goes to Aunt May's home that night, oblivious that it's his birthday. What a shitty day for this birthday boy. He gets fired, told that he's failing his classes, and does not get paid well. Peter has very much become estranged from the people closest to him, especially Mary Jane and Harry Osborn. Harry still accuses Spider-Man for murdering his dad, and MJ still has feelings for Peter, as they talk it out after Peter's birthday party. And why is it that Peter sounds so horny right here?
I liked seeing you tonight, Peter.
Oh boy, yeah.
This scene is kind of a chance for Peter to finally accept MJ, but again he declines and just tells her that he is going to see her play, and she is very much excited for it. Aunt May is also having financial issues and is being threatened with foreclosure, and yet she still gives Peter some money. Peter declines, but Aunt May tells Peter that he should still take it despite not being much. I love Rosemary Harris' performance in this scene. It truly shows us the guilt that Aunt May has over the death of Ben and her inability to help Peter over his financial gains. It truly feels relatable and is very much an emotional conflict that Aunt May and Peter goes through. We then cut to Peter going home to his shitty apartment, where his landlord, Mr. Ditkovich, just wouldn't shut up about Peter's rent. If the name sounds familiar, well, the name is a reference to Steve Ditko, the original illustrator and co-creator of Spider-Man. And then we cut to Peter sitting alone in his shitty apartment room. This scene alone truly shows us the isolation and loneliness that Peter experiences. And it's just truly sad. It's just sad, man. Harry is now the head of Oscorp and has invested in the research of a brilliant scientist named Professor Otto Octavius, played by Alfred Molina. And let me tell you, Otto Octavius is the best Spider-Man villain, period. Just fucking period. Even though the Green Goblin is the most terrifying and psychotic Spider-Man villain ever put to film, but to me, however, Otto Octavius is by far the best because of the character's tragic downfall. He's very much human and it makes the character even more sympathetic, and Alfred Molina plays the character to perfection. And of course, he would reprise his role in No Way Home. Harry hired Otto to perform a fusion experiment that is powered by a tritium, and that day, Peter is there to interview Octavius for his research. And after doing his research, Peter prepares to go to MJ's play. But Peter shows up late as he nearly got hit by an incoming car, and afterwards, he was stopping the criminals that are being chased by the police and the same criminals that nearly run him over. Peter tries to convince the usher to let him in, but the usher tells him that he was late and could not let him in. This usher is played by the legendary Bruce Campbell, who also played the announcer in the first movie. Bruce Campbell has collaborated with Raimi since The Evil Dead and plays the main hero in that series, Ash Williams.
Groovy.
After the play, Peter is very much devastated to learn that MJ is in a relationship with JJ's son, John Jameson. Peter leaves and goes back to being Spider-Man to stop some crime. But he briefly starts to lose his powers because of the stress that is being caused in his normal life. We then cut to Dr. Octavius' lab for his fusion experiment. Peter and Harry attend a public demonstration, and we see that Octavius has developed an AI-generated tentacles that can maintain the fusion experiment. The tentacles are controlled by an inhibitor chip at the back of Otto's neck. And the experiment was a success at first, but a power spike causes the fusion reactor to destabilize. Octavius refuses to shut down the reactor, which goes critical, nearly killing Harry, but was saved by Spider-Man. But Otto's wife isn't lucky and gets killed by shards of flying glass that impales her in the eye. Spider-Man manages to stop the reactor, but the inhibitor chip at the back of Otto's neck is permanently fused with the tentacles to his spine and damaging his brain. While unconscious, Otto is taken to a hospital to get the tentacles removed. And we get one of the most tense and horrific moments in any Spider-Man movies, the tentacles having minds of their own and brutally kill the surgeons. This moment in the film is pure Sam Raimi and is very much an homage to his horror roots, mainly The Evil Dead. We get first-person shots, zoom shots, and a reference to Ash Williams. And what I love about this scene is the atmosphere and the lack of music. It feels very eerie and haunting, and the only sounds that we hear are the mechanical noises of the tentacles and the helpless screams of the surgeons. It's expertly shot, edited, and directed, and really kudos to editor Bob Murawski, cinematographer Bill Pope, and of course, Sam Raimi. Afterwards, Octavius escapes and hides in a harbor. JJ learns of this and starts to nickname him Dr. Octopus. Or should I say he stole it from Hoffman, one of Jameson's staff. We cut back to Octavius lamenting over the events that happened earlier. Octavius is also corrupted by the tentacles, and they start to play on his sanity and ego. He plans to rebuild the reactor and make it stronger, but in order to finance his experiment, the tentacles convince Otto to rob a bank, and so he does. Octavius robs a bank to where Peter and Aunt May happen to be present. He fights off the tentacle man, and Spider-Man experiences a short glitch in his powers. But he manages to recover after getting knocked out by Octavius and nearly getting his head crushed by the tentacles. The two take their fight outside the bank, where Doc Ock took Aunt May as hostage. Spider-Man fights Doc Ock on top of a building while trying to rescue Aunt May. And during their fight, we get a cameo from the late Stan Lee, may he rest in peace. And Spider-Man gets thrown into another building while Doc Ock presumes to take Aunt May as hostage. Spider-Man manages to rescue Aunt May after she hits Doc Ock with her umbrella while he was plotting to kill Spider-Man. Aunt May also changes her former opinion of Spider-Man and realizes that he is a hero. Spider-Man swings off victorious, but Octavius escapes unharmed. Later that night, Peter attends a party that he agreed on earlier to get an advanced raise by Jameson. But he's very much devastated to learn that MJ is marrying JJ's son. And he also gets into a physical altercation with Harry, who is drunk because of Octavius' failed experiment, leaving Oscorp bankrupt, and also blaming Peter for defending Spider-Man. This is such a low point for Peter that we transition to Spider-Man swinging in the night. But while web-slinging across town, he loses his powers again and falls into an alley. He is unable to spin webs, his wall-crawling abilities no longer work, and his spider sense is greatly diminished. We then transition to Peter having an emotional breakdown and some sort of weird purgatory with Uncle Ben, and he decides that he quits being Spider-Man because of the heavy toll that it brings to Peter's life. He dumps his suit in a garbage can, which is a recreation to a panel from Spider-Man No More, and Peter returns to his normal life. We then get a montage of Peter's normal life with Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head by B.J. Thomas playing in the background. This is such a happy moment for Peter in the film. He finally gets an easy life and no longer has to carry the burden of being Spider-Man. And after that montage, we cut to Peter attending MJ's play, and she is very much shocked to see Peter to the point where she even forgets her lines. And afterwards, Peter tries to reconcile with MJ, but she tells him that it's too late and that she's finally getting married. We then cut to the Bugle where a garbage guy finds Spider-Man's suit and hands it over to Jameson. Then, JJ makes a headline that Spider-Man is no more. Again, a reference to the title of Spider-Man No More. However, this has a heavy toll over the city as crime has risen and there is no one to help the people who are in need. We see this in effect when Peter is walking in the street where some poor dude gets mobbed in an alleyway. After visiting Uncle Ben's grave, Aunt May is very much distressed by Peter's confession that he was somewhat responsible for his Uncle Ben's death. In the meantime, Doc Ock has completed rebuilding his reactor and needs one final item, of course the tritium that powers the reactor, and he goes to Harry for it. But Harry refuses and Octavius dangles him over the edge of the balcony. Harry agrees to give Ock what he needs in exchange for capturing Spider-Man, and he tells Octavius how to find him via Peter Parker. Meanwhile, Peter sees a burning building and without hesitation enters the burning building to rescue an innocent child. This must be my favorite moment in the film. It truly shows us the determination and heroism that Peter has even without his powers. But after saving the child and escaping the burning building, we soon learn, including Peter, that there was an innocent soul stuck in that building without ever making it out alive. And the guilt that Peter has over this makes him realize that Spider-Man is needed by the people. The next morning, he goes back to visit Aunt May and sees her packing her things to move into a much affordable apartment. She and Peter also reconcile, and she tells Peter of the hope that Spider-Man brings to others in spite of what dreams he may have to sacrifice. Those words inspire Peter to go back to being Spider-Man by jumping over a building like a madman. But again, his powers still haven't returned and he falls and breaks his back. We then cut to MJ failing to recreate that feeling that she had when she kissed Spider-Man. MJ then meets up with Peter at a coffee shop to ask him if he still loves her, but Peter tells her that he does not. But just as MJ is about to kiss Peter, Peter's spider sense goes off after Doc Ock throws a car at the coffee shop. Jesus Christ, Octavius, didn't Harry tell you to basically ask Peter not to kill him? Jesus Christ. Octavius tells Peter to find Spider-Man and then kidnaps MJ in the process. Peter gets his powers back, and then we cut to the Bugle where Peter takes his suit back while JJ rants and he swings off to face Doc Ock in battle. The fight starts off at the top of a bell tower and then on top of a subway train. But during the battle, Doc Ock disables the brakes to the train, forcing Spider-Man to stop the speeding train. Spider-Man puts all of his strength, sweat, blood, and tears and testicles just so he could stop the speeding train and save the people inside it. He passes out, but the people inside the train catch him and seize him without his mask on. One of the things that makes this sequence so good is that it shows us the overall strength, determination, and sheer will that Peter has as he stops the speeding train to save innocent lives. The people on the train then promise to keep his identity a secret out of respect, and they give him back his mask, fully symbolizing his return. They also try to defend him against Doc Ock, but they fail and Octavius manages to capture a weakened Spider-Man. We then transition to the Oscorp penthouse where Octavius delivers Spider-Man to Harry. Harry gives Octavius the tritium and is about to kill Spider-Man. Harry unmasks Spider-Man and is very much shit-to-pants shocked to learn that Spider-Man is none other than his best friend, Peter Parker. Peter convinces Harry to reveal Octavius' whereabouts so he can rescue Mary Jane. He also finds out what Octavius' plans are, and while Harry is blaming Peter for his father's death, Peter tells Harry that bigger things are at stake than their friendship. We then cut to the warehouse where we see MJ being held up while Octavius is firing up the reactor. Spider-Man arrives and is about to free MJ, but Octavius notices and Spider-Man tries to tell Ock that the experiment will endanger a lot of people. Octavius again refuses, but Spider-Man does not. The two fight and Spider-Man easily beats the Tentacle Man, but while they were fighting, the reactor starts to absorb everything and MJ is nearly sucked into it. Spider-Man rescues MJ but is easily knocked out by Octavius. MJ tries to help but is also easily pushed away. Octavius was about to kill Spider-Man, but he stuns the Tentacle Man with an electric shock via the reactor's cables, and the machine also goes critical in the process. Spider-Man reveals his identity to Octavius and tries to convince him to stop the machine. But Octavius is still in the influence of the tentacles, and Peter tells Otto to let go of his dreams to do what's right. Those inspiring words convinces Otto to finally snap back into reality and regains control over the tentacles. Otto tells Peter that the machine can't be stopped, but Octavius finds a solution, and that is to drown it at the bottom of the river. Otto finally gets his anime redemption arc and sacrifices himself to drown the machine. And while Peter stares at Octavius, MJ sees Peter without his mask on and is very much shocked to the point of joy. She is nearly crushed by falling debris and Peter shouts like a madman. He rescues her and the two escape the warehouse while Octavius drowns the machine into the river and dies in the process. Peter and MJ rest on a giant cobweb made out of Peter's webs, which is a bit gross. And Peter tells MJ the truth onto why they should never be together, as Spider-Man will always have enemies and that he could never risk her life because of his burden. And after Spider-Man puts her down on a safe platform, he looks on and finally accepts the role that he was given and he swings away. We then cut back to the Oscorp mansion where Harry has visions of his late father, Norman Osborn. The illusion demands that his son kill Peter to avenge his death. Harry refuses, however, and throws a dagger at the mirror, shattering it and revealing a secret room containing the Green Goblin's suit, gear, and the serum that gave him his strength. And yeah, this scene sets up Harry as the new Goblin in the next film. We then cut to a cathedral to witness MJ's wedding, but she leaves her wedding and JJ's son along the process. This must have to be an expensive wedding that JJ had to pay for. And she goes to Peter's apartment to tell Peter that she wants to be with him despite the risk. Oh, that's nice. The two then kiss, again, nice, and Peter senses a sudden call for help and MJ accepts his duty as Spider-Man. The movie ends with MJ looking on with uncertainty over the choice that she chose as Spider-Man swings away. And recap over. Wow, what a movie! Now that that's done, let's talk about the best moment and the best character and give out my overall opinion. Let's go ahead to my ratings. So, what are my overall thoughts of the film? Well, Spider-Man 2 is a perfect Spider-Man film and a perfect superhero film in general. Well, aside from The Dark Knight and Logan. And one of the things that makes this film so special is that it tells an engaging and personal story about the life of Peter Parker. And as we see throughout this film, Peter struggles and falls. We see him unable to make choices about what he wants and what he needs to be. And as the movie progresses, it deeply affects his lifestyle. And I like that, as it makes the character even more relatable. He's a superhero for sure, but is deeply flawed and human. And aside from all of that, the action sequences are absolutely incredible. It's very low level, but the way it's presented feels grandeur and epic. The film is well edited, like the first film, expertly directed, well choreographed, and brilliantly written. And I just give my utmost love and respect for this film that I can't even give any criticisms. High-end moment for me must have to go to Peter saving that little child from a burning building. That moment in the film truly shows us what true heroism is, and that you don't need any special abilities to do the right thing, and that all you need is determination, bravery, and sheer will. And can you believe that that scene was nearly shorter than it is? High-end character must have to go to... It's obvious, I'm giving it to Otto Octavius. He is such an engaging villain that you kind of understand what he goes through throughout the film. And he's not much of a villain either, in my own perspective at least, but rather a conflicted soul manipulated by beings that he created and his inability to accept his failures. Such a brilliant character, and is just overall the best written villain that I know at least. Overall, an amazing film that tells a down-to-earth story filled with lots of emotion, brilliant characters, stunning visuals, and a genuine sense of heart. And I give my final score of a 10 out of 10. Well, that's it for this another nonsensical breakdown. I hope you enjoyed, and I would love to know your own opinion of the film. Well, write them down at the comment section below, and I'll see you all in the next breakdown. Take care, my dudes.